is Ray O'Keefe. I'm an alcoholic, member of the Miami Men's Group in Miami, Florida, group of discontented misogynists who rattle around down there. And I'm supposed to be talking 3 hours on primary purpose. Well, forget it. 3 hours. But I'm going to talk. First, I'm going to talk about something that I like to talk about particularly, and it's the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's a history you don't hear very much about. It's a history that doesn't begin in Akron, Ohio. In fact, it ends in Akron, Ohio. And I think it's a true story. It's a good AA story, and like all true good AA stories, it has a moral to it, which is consistent with our primary purpose, about which I will speak probably at great length in a little while. I also brought over where Al is something I wrote 10 or 11, maybe even 12 years ago on this subject, and I brought some copies, and you can have them, and you can copy them and do anything you want with it. All of this is covered in my 6-volume work, Humility and Beyond. Humility and Beyond has been a great seller, and this is all covered there. Now, anyhow, I want to talk to you about this history because I think it's important, and I sure do like the way I tell it. Now, I don't know where AA had its origins. I don't know where a spiritual force, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, where it begins. I don't know. Movements such as ours, which are spiritual, usually have their origins in the mind of God, somewhere. And that's a difficult place to locate. But I'll tell you when it began to become evident to me. I discovered this around before the First World War, in the 1910s or so. A cast of characters began to assemble in a little town in Vermont, Manchester, Vermont. Manchester, Vermont is a very beautiful place. It's in the southern portion of Vermont. It's at that point of the state of Vermont where the states of Massachusetts, New York, and Vermont all come together. It's a resort town. It's got a golf course. It's got a big hotel. It's even got a little mountain, the Equinox Mountain. It's got a lake. It's really a nice place. And down from East Dorset, Vermont, which is about 12 miles up Route 7, which used to be the main north-south route before the interstate. Down from there came this Bill Wilson. He went to come to the prep school. There was a prep school in Manchester. I think it's still there, Manchester Academy. Came down with his violin, his boomerang, and his baseball glove. And he enrolled in the prep school. And then over from Albany, New York, which is only about 30 miles to the west, the capital of New York State, came another young man named Ebby Thatcher, whose family were very prominent accountants. They were CPAs in Albany, and they had this beautiful home right on the main street of Manchester, Vermont. And then up from Brooklyn, New York, came this physician, Dr. Burnham, with his lovely daughter Lois, about whom we all know. And then from New York City, by way of Newport, Rhode Island, came a very, very rich young man named Roland Hazard, whose family had a farm about 20 miles outside of Manchester. And these young people, all in their teens, who had no possible idea of what the future was going to hold for them or us, began to mix, as do young people everywhere, and they had all of the social lives that you and I had at that age. And then the war came, the big war. Bill, of course, tells us in our book that he was off to the Army. Bill had graduated Norwich University, which is a small college up in Northfield, Vermont, and it's got a big ROTC presence, and he was part of that. And he had a second lieutenant's commission in the Vermont National Guard, which was a field artillery unit. And so he was off as our book says, to Westminster Cathedral and then to France for the war, and the rest of them dispersed. When the war was over in 1919, 1920, they reassembled in Manchester, Vermont, this crowd, and they enjoyed the company of one another again, and you all know Bill ended up marrying Lois and went back to live in Brooklyn. He went back to, he got a job with an insurance company, and he went to law school at night. And he got about his life, which included a lot of drinking, and so did the rest of them. The first one to get in serious trouble with the booze was the rich kid, Roland Hazard. And Roland came up a really unmanageable alcoholic, and his family did everything they could to help him. They brought him to all of these sanitaria. This is not a new problem. This problem's been going on forever and ever. There's always been places for rich people to go dry out. And so they sent Roland all around, but it didn't work. So they finally sent him in desperation to the greatest psychiatrist of the time, Carl Jung, the colleague of Sigmund Freud, who had his own hospital in Switzerland. And Roland Hazard went over there and stayed a whole year with Jung. And he was pronounced and certified and all the rest of it, and he was sent home. And he started back, and he got as far as Paris when someone asked him the wrong question. Someone said to Roland, "Would you like a drink?" The only time I said no to that question, I completely misunderstood the question. So Roland had a drink. In fact, he had more than several, and he went back to Jung. He said, "Look at this. Look, as you would have done, or I would have done." He said, "I'm a whole year with you. All that money, all that time, and now I'm just as bad as ever I was." And Jung didn't really appreciate the fact that Roland Hazard was an alcoholic. And he said to him, "I have never seen an alcoholic of your type recover. Never. You're going to die from this thing." And of course, when you got news given to you like that, Roland immediately said, "Is there no possible way out?" And Jung said, "Yeah, there is. Here and there, now and then, once in a while, very, very rare. It's a phenomena. It's not repeatable. It's not science. People like you have a religious experience, and that takes care of it. They have a transference of religion takes care of their alcohol. But apart from that, you're a dead duck, and you're finished, and forget about it." Well, it's nice to have money. Because Roland went out to buy himself a spiritual experience. And he found for sale the Oxford Group. And he took the Oxford Group, a bunch of them, and now we're in the 1930s now, he took a bunch of these people to Manchester, Vermont. And he turned his father's gentleman's farm into a commune for the Oxford people. And they had 25, 30 people. This is the middle of the Great Depression in the United States. Everybody's wiped out. And he's feeding them, and he's got all the money. He's got dough. And they got a free ride, and they live together. They do all of the Oxford stuff together. And they're up there in Manchester, Vermont. The next one who got into trouble was Ebby Thatcher. Ebby's family exiled him from Albany, New York, and they sent him out of town. He was an embarrassment. They made him go live in the summer house over in Manchester, Vermont. I don't know if you've ever been to Albany, New York, but being exiled from Albany, New York is like being exiled from Newport News, A Navy veteran speaks to you. The first thing Ebby did to cause pep things up a bit was come around the corner and into a farmer's kitchen in his car. Very tricky corners in Vermont, and he stepped out of the car and asked if anybody had a drink. Well, Vermonters are not notorious for their humor, and neither was this guy, so they got the cops and they had him in front of the local judge, and the local judge gave him the speech. "I used to be a judge. I gave the speech many times. You know, if I ever see you again, he went through the whole thing with him. So Ebby got out of that, and he had some fit of alcoholic remorse, you know, that thing that we used to get, oh dear. So in order to square things, he decided he would paint the family house. Now we're talking about one of these Victorian things with the spires and the towers, and they're very big. It's right on the main street of Manchester, Vermont. Now, he knows nothing of painting, but he's alcoholic, so he doesn't have to know anything about painting. So he goes out and he buys some paint, and he buys a brush, and he gets a ladder, and he gets, you know. The trouble is he could only get up to the second rung of the ladder. He kept falling off the ladders. But he did get a little spot painted, and then he did what we all would do. He got a beach chair and a quart of booze, and he decided to sit down and sort of watch his paint. You know, make sure it bask in the glory of. And while he was doing that, a pigeon had the temerity to take a shit upon the paint, which so enraged Ebby that he went into the house and came back out with a shotgun. Now you have a lunatic drunk with a shotgun shooting at pigeons on the main street of Manchester, Vermont. And here's Ebby back in front of the same judge. And the judge is prepared to you know, throw the book, as we say. But it is the United States of America. He does have certain rights, and they give him a phone call. Well, who would you call? He called his rich friend, Roland, up at the farm. He says, I'm in trouble with... And down came Roland with two other guys from the farm. And Roland said to the judge, we'll take him. You don't have to put him away. We'll take him. We'll take care of him. And they did. They got Ebby, and they bring him back up. And now Ebby's up at the farm with Roland, and both of them are not drinking. And we're into around October of 34. It gets cold in Vermont. I went to college up there. And around Columbus Day, it starts to turn. It gets a little cold. And so Roland, when you're rich, you don't have to be cold. He said, let's go back to New York, where he had the big place. And so he and Ebby come down to New York. Now, this is in the Depression, 34. And in the Depression in this country, there were a thing called soup kitchens. They're all over the place. And they were free food. And a lot of people needed free food. I'm not talking about alcoholics or pathological people, just people. Ordinary people who didn't have food. And you went through the soup kitchen, you got soup, you got a sandwich, you got an apple in most of them. I remember. And the Calvary Church, which is an Episcopal church, Dr. Shoemaker, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, the 30s. If you go there this very day, you'll see the main window is a gift of the Hazard family. They contributed to the church. And they maintained a soup kitchen. And so Ebby Thatcher and Roland Hazard were on the soup kitchen, handing out the soup to the people coming through. Part of the Oxford group, part of their spiritual life. And Ebby testifies. Ebby says the thought came to him, and he doesn't know where it came from. I should call my friend Bill Wilson. Where he doesn't know, he said it just buzzed into his head. One day he's with the soup. So he called Bill Wilson. Bill says the phone rang. I picked it up. He said it was my friend. And he said he wanted to come visit me, and I said, come right out. And Ebby went out to Brooklyn. It's half hour from where he was. And he rings the bell, and Bill says, this is terrific, because Bill has 3 quarts of bathtub gin. In those days, they used to make it in the bathtub. They clean out the bathtub, fill it up with water and distilled spirits, some juniper berries, stir it around, and that was called gin. And Bill had 3 quarts of it. He said he had hidden it all around the house, and he had just one more plot. He wanted to hide one more bottle to get through the night. But he knew he could get drunk that day and one more day. He says that in our book. And the doorbell rings. He opens the bell, and there's Ebby. And Bill said he would look forward to this. He said they were going to talk about the old days. You know, what you and I would do if some bum showed up that we used to drink with. Right? Talk about the good old days. He said, Bill says in our book about the chartered flight. Bill Wilson and Ebby Thatcher were the first people to land at the Manchester, Vermont airport. The reason they were the first ones to land at the Manchester, Vermont airport is they landed the day before it opened. They made a small error about the timing, and they were very drunk, And they rolled off the plane, and the local high school band was rehearsing for the next day's opening, and these two thought it was for them. And they came off the plane, my fellow Americans, you know. And Bill thought this is what he would do with Ebby. He would sit in the kitchen, you know, they'd have a drink, remember the time we did this, remember the time we did that, all that great stuff. So they go into the kitchen, Bill pulls out the gin, and he takes another look at Ebby. And he says in our book, something happened to the old boy. And he said to him, it says in our book, come now, he says, what happened to you? And Ebby said, I got religion. And Bill said, oh, God. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. This summer, a religious crackpot. Oh, well, more gin for me. Now, Ebby is full of the Oxford group. You remember when you and I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, that first surge of spiritual power that came into our lives. We were full of AA. We were going to call up our cousin Charlie. Stop drinking, Charlie. We were going to, you know, get out there and, by God, make a difference. Until we develop into, well, who gives a shit? And this is Ebby. He's full of it. And Bill says, he starts at Bill don't want to hear it. Bill, please. You know, Bill had gone to school. He liked scientists. His degree, his college degree, was in electrical engineering. You know that? So he was had that kind of a mind. And they didn't want to hear about all this business about the Oxford group. But then Ebby said the thing that really got Bill's attention. And he said it got his attention so much that they italicized it in the book. They underlined it. And he said to Bill, you can form your own concept of God. With us, with the Oxford group. It's God as you understand him. Bill had never heard that. Bill was Episcopalian. You know, God's frozen people. You can't form your own concept of God if you're an Episcopalian or a Catholic or anybody else. You take they got it already. Before you showed up, they got one. Here it is. This is our God. And it got Bill's attention. He said, this to himself, this is a wonderful thing. He did not stop drinking. He did not stop drinking. He went to Towns Hospitals a couple more times. He had a terrific bout on Veterans Day, November 11, 1934. And then finally his sobriety day is December the 11th, 1934. And on December the 11th, he buys 3 bottles of beer, does Bill, and goes up to Towns Hospital. Now, the Grapevine a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years, I guess, reprinted a picture, a photostat, or printing, or whatever the hell you call it, of Bill's admission form in Towns Hospital. He said he'd been there 8 times before, and that the bill had been paid by his brother-in-law, $125, by Lois, his brother, who was an osteopathic physician. And it had all his, you know, his height, his weight, his blood pressure, all that stuff, his hospital chart. Bill says he got into the hospital, and Ebby came to see him. That was the first thing. He called up Ebby. And Ebby says, my schoolmate visited me. I want to make sure I have, I don't like to quote the book unless I have it, because I don't want to misquote the book. I got Sammy's book here, which is well used. And he says about the hospital, my schoolmate visited me. I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of the people I had hurt and toward whom I felt resentments. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. My friend promised me that when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain a new order of things were the essential requirements. Now notice, see, I have an attitude about AA. That's a a gross understatement. And I have opinions, and I don't necessarily want to inflict my opinions on you, because we don't share opinions, we share experience. But my sobriety date is November 24, 1965. And I said to my sponsor, how many of those meetings with those people do I have to go to? He said, yeah, we thought about you. 7 a week will do. Suddenly pushed me around. I went to 9, and now I go to 8. So I've been to a lot of AA meetings. So my opinions are based on experience. And here is one of my basic opinions. Alcoholics Anonymous does not have to do with alcohol. Alcoholics Anonymous has to do with establishing a relationship with God. That is one of my basic opinions. And don't tell me you don't believe in God, because I don't give a goddamn what you believe in. Believing in God has nothing to do with it. I got some fool now that I sponsor. He don't want to say the third step prayer. He says he's an atheist. I said, you can be an atheist. I don't care. No one cares what you believe, you moron. You probably believe the world is flat. I'm not telling you what to believe. I said, I'm telling you what to do. You will say the third step prayer. Or I'm going to have a drunken atheist on my hands, and I can't handle it. Now listen to what Ebby told Bill. Wouldn't you think, if you had a friend like Bill, his drinking is out of control, wouldn't you say to Bill, listen, you'll stop drinking? Wouldn't you say that to him? You're going to be able to stop drinking, Bill. You'll finally get that monkey off your back. You're going to be okay. You're not going to have to sit up all night and drink that crap gin. You're not going to have to move your bed down the floor so you don't jump out the window. Ebby didn't say that to Bill at all. He said, you will enter with a new relationship with your Creator. You will have the elements of a way of living which will answer all your problems. That's what he told him. And that's the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, the spiritual awakening. Drinking is just a symptom of what's the matter with me. Drinking was never my problem. It was never your problem either. Did someone have to teach you how to drink? Do you have to say, where do I stand? How do I hold this, you know? Please. Now, Ebby goes. Ebby leaves. The hospital, it's all over. Bill now feels the way you and I felt that day before we came here. Remember that? You'll never forget it, will you? When Bill says of himself, quicksand spread in all directions. You remember that? You knew you'd gone too far. And it was all over. And you know that thing. Let me explain this to you. You'll understand this. I know you will. It comes at 4 o'clock in the morning. You remember it? And it comes into the room. And it wakes you up. And your body says, I need a drink. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And you may be in bed with someone, but you're all alone. And the bullshit is all over. And the bombast and the bravado and all that stuff is all finished. And you know it's got you by the throat, and there's not a goddamn thing in the world that you can do about it. Now you can get up and have a couple of drinks, but it's very tricky because you got to get up at 7 and go to work anyhow. So you got to work chemistry. You know, if I have 3, like a pig, if I finish this bottle like I want to, then, you know. And the Irish call that the creature. I don't know why, the creature. And the creature has you. Get you by the... Yeah. And that's what happened to Bill. Bill gets in the little hospital bed there. 30's hospital bed. And the creature's got him. And he can't sit, he can't lie still, he can't turn, he can't. So he ends up on his knees on the floor. And Bill says, if there is a God, let him show himself now. And Bill reports that the room lit up with a light so intensive that he no longer could see the walls. And that in his mind's eye, he was transported to another dimension, and a wind blew through that room. And he said to himself, so, this is the God of the preachers, this thing I've heard about. Now, it subsided, of course, and he sent for Silkworth. The great Silkworth came, and Bill said, Bill's an experienced alcoholism patient. It's his 8th time. He says in the book, I was on the verge of the DTs. And he knew it. And he said to Silkworth, what do you think? And Silkworth said, well, I don't know, I wasn't here. You know, I'm a scientist, I wasn't here. But you look a lot better now than you did a few hours ago. So whatever happened to you, you better use it. And Bill did. And Bill got out of there, and he went down to the soup kitchen with Ebby and Roland. So now there's 3 of them handing out the soup. And Bill was trying to sell his story to the people coming through the line, some of whom are alcoholics. And also, in every neighborhood in New York, there's a bar in every corner. So he's going through the bars around there in the 30s, and he's trying to interest people in the fact that his room lit up. See, in New York City has people. I'm from New York. I was born in New York City. I was born in the Bronx. I grew up there. Blah, blah, blah. People like me from New York have a certain attitude. And it does not include somebody coming into a bar telling to tell me about his room lighting up. You know what I'm saying? The New York response to that is, yeah, light this one up, Charlie. You know, jump up here and take a light. I'll show you something. So he went back up to Silkworth. He said, I'm going into these people. Well, imagine if all of that had happened to you. If God had showed up in your hospital room. My God, you know. And Bill's trying to, and he said to Silkworth, nobody wants to pay any attention to me. And Silkworth said, that's not the message. You got the wrong message. The right message is the same message that Jung gave to Roland. You're going to die. That gets their attention. Tell them, emphasize to Silkworth the fatal nature of this disease. Now he has to go to Akron, Ohio. Now we're getting Akron, Ohio. Out he goes to Akron, Ohio. You all know the story. It's Mother's Day weekend of 1935. Everybody goes back to New York, his crowd, for the Mother's Day. He's got $10. He can't afford to go back. He's in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel, and he's thinking about having a drink in a gay bar. It says he could hear that gay crowd inside. You didn't know that, did you? Now, here's a guy, here's an alcoholic who had God in his room in December. He had God, Almighty God, in his room in December, and he wants to go into a bar in May. This shows you God is good for, what, 6 months? But he doesn't do that. He makes a series of phone calls, and he ends up with Henrietta Seiberling. And here's where it really gets interesting. Really gets interesting. I'm a lawyer, and I used to try cases. And this is the proof. This is it. This is the one you could sell right to anybody. Henrietta Seiberling is the estranged daughter of Frank Seiberling Jr. Frank Seiberling Sr. is the chairman of the board of Goodyear Rubber. Just recently I saw her on cable TV, Castles of America, and there was a Seiberling Castle. What an enormous thing it is. And Henrietta's living in the gatehouse because her husband, Frankie Jr., is a boozer and a bum, and she can't live with him. And the whole family knows it, so they gave her the gatehouse. She's a member of the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group of Akron, Ohio had a practice, and the practice was, there are many practices, but one of the practices was, on the first meeting of the month, any member of the group could stand up and talk about a problem, much the same we do in our meetings. You know, anybody got a problem, that kind of thing. So the first meeting in May, Dr. Robert Smith, local proctologist, we dress him up, we call him a surgeon. He was a proctologist. Not a bad specialty. You're going to deal with a lot of alcoholics, I'll tell you. Dr. Bob Smith stood up at the first meeting of the Akron Oxford Group meeting, and he said, I have a drinking problem. And they knew it. They all knew it. He didn't think they did, but they all did. And then they agreed, it was part of the Oxford Group thing, they agreed, each one of them agreed, that every morning they would get on their knees and pray to God to send help for Bob. And here's Henrietta, the top of Akron society, a lovely lady, enormous wealth and all the rest of it. And her phone rings. And this voice on the other end of the phone, she has no idea, says, "My name is Bill Wilson. I am a rummy from New York. And I have a way to fix drunks." That's what he said to her. And she said, "Of course you do." You see? Henrietta is a woman of faith. Henrietta knew, like she knew her own name, that if she asked God to send help for Bob, God was going to send help for Bob. That's all there was to it. Henrietta said later, now her son was the congressman from Akron, Ohio, might still be for all I know, and he put all of this stuff in the Congressional Record when she died in the 70s, and he called it My Mother's Involvement with AA. It's a very interesting thing if you ever see it. Anyhow, she said she wanted to look this guy over, make sure he wasn't an axe murderer or something. So she said, "Come on out," and he came out, and they talked for a while. She became convinced that he was okay. She said, "Where are you staying?" He said, "The Mayflower." "Oh, you can't stay." She put him in the golf club, the Akron Golf Club, set him right up. And then she called Dr. Bob's house. She got Ann, Bob's wife. It's the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. And she says, "I have the guy here to fix Bob." Because Ann was a member of the Oxford Group, too. And she said, and Henrietta said to her, just like you'd say it's Tuesday, "The guy's here to fix Bob. You know, you better bring Bob over, get him fixed." And Ann said, "I'd love to, but he's passed out under the table. He brought home a potted plant." She said, "He's more potted than the plant. And I have learned," she said, "from long experience to let sleeping drunks sleep. But I'll have him out first thing in the morning." Now, you know first thing in the morning how Bob felt. And here's his wife, "We're going out to Henrietta's. There's a man out there who's going to fix you." And Bob says, "I will give that guy from New York," that's how they talk about Bill out in Akron to this day, "that guy from New York," he said, "I'll give that guy from New York 15 minutes. The meeting lasted 5 hours. And you remember that television thing they did, Bill W. was a very effective thing with James Garner and James Woods. You remember that? Very effective scene. And Woods is Wilson and Garner is Smith, and they're meeting there, and they're in the Henrietta's study, and Garner has that medical attitude, you know. He said, "Just how do you think you're going to help me, Mr. Wilson?" And Wilson said, "I'm not here to help you. I'm here to help me, Doctor." And so they had this talk. Now, Bill told Bob all about what happened to him. And Bob said of Bill, he was the first one I had ever spoken to who spoke to me from personal experience about alcohol. It's easy. We all had people talk down to us, and there were the doctors, the nurses, the bosses, the judges, the cops, the friends. It's when that sponsor got a hold of you and said, "I understand exactly what's going through your head, you miserable, rotten bastard," you know. And he told him all of it, 5 hours. And Bob said, "I will do everything you say." "This is terrific," Bob said. "I'll do everything you say except one thing. I cannot make amends. This is a small town. I'm a physician. I'm on my last hospital affiliation. I'm broke. And the last thing in the world I can do is go around Akron, Ohio, and tell people I've been drunk for the last 25 years. I can't do it." So then Bill moves into Bob's house. Bill says, "I'll take what I got," and he moves in. And then Bob gets one of those, you know, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Did you ever have one of those thoughts? You know, what the hell am I doing here? I seem like a good idea at the time. Are you the bridesmaid? That's nice. he announces, Bob does, that he's going to the American Medical Association convention in Atlantic City. Of course, his wife, you can't go there. You get drunk every time you go there. He said, I'm going. Bill says, not a good idea. He says, I'm going. So he went. He was drunk before he left Akron. And he got drunk, came back. And his nurse's husband found him fighting in a bar, having a fight in a bar. Nice thing for a doctor. The nurse's husband took him home, threw him on a couch, called up Bob's house and says, I got him. And Ann says, well, he's due at the hospital in the morning at a certain time, and we'll come get him. Bill came out in Bob's car, brought 3 bottles of beer, and some pheno-bobs, goofballs they called them then. Took Bob over to the city hospital, gave him the beer, gave him the goofballs, and left him the car, and Bob went up and worked on some guy's ass, and which is what he did, for a living. And now it's, in Akron, Ohio, we eat dinner at 5 o'clock. And now it's 5 o'clock, it's dinner time, and there's no Bob, so he's drunk. And now it's 7 o'clock, and he's drunk. And now it's 9 o'clock, he's really done it this time. He shows up at midnight, and he's dry. Never had a drink. And, of course, the first question that came from Bill, where you been? He said, I've been driving around Akron, Ohio, mending fences. It's an old Vermont expression. He was making those amends the very first day that he stopped drinking. You see what Bob did, he said to Bill, I'll take your program, except for one thing. He said, I will be sober, but I will not make amends. He wanted conditional sobriety. I won't do all the steps, I'll do some of the steps. It's not possible in our program to have that kind of sobriety. And the book is a book of experience, and the books they wrote, at some of these steps we balked. Correct? We thought we could find an easier, softer way. That's what Bob thought. Bob thought there was an easier, softer way. But the results were nil until we let go. And let go absolutely. There is no such thing as conditional sobriety. The book says wife or no wife. Job or no job. Let no man say, don't let him say it, that he will only become sober if his family comes back, because we've had the families come back and the guy did not stay sober. And we've had the families never come back and the guy stayed sober for the rest of his life. Don't let him say it, that he will do everything except he can't make amends. Because he's different. He's a doctor. Because he's special. He's a doctor. Nobody is special. Now, and then, of course, you know what happened. From then on, we're in Akron, Ohio, and they get billed the next day, and so forth and so on. And here we are in 1997 in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I'll tell you this, that's a long, long way from Akron, Ohio. And I'm not talking about geography. That's a long way from Akron, Ohio. That's a lot of lives since Akron, Ohio. A lot of years since Akron, Ohio. And here we are, you and I. Now, I submit to you that none of this is coincidental. I submit that to you. It's not a coincidence. These people assembled the way they did before the big war, first war. They were a cast of characters in a morality play, the author of which was this power that we talk about all the time. And they all had roles to play. And they didn't even know that they had roles to play. They had no idea what they were doing. If you had said to them in 1915, you're going to all be the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, what? You know, we're just kids having a good time here. We're just trying to do things that kids try to do. We don't want to be founders of anything. They might want to play tennis or golf, you know. Now, I submit all that to you. And I think it's a great story. And I think it's nothing less than a miracle. And then I get to my assignment. I was assigned this assignment, and that is to talk to you about our primary purpose. And I'm happy to do so. And I start, everything I start about is, I start talking usually about the book. And in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that's this book here, the blue book. This is Sammy's book. And when you come in, you read the black part. See over here, the black part. You read that part there. Don't go reading this white part. Because if you do, you will go blind. And some of you will go blind from the other thing, so we don't want you to go twice blind here. And then this book was published in 1938, 39, and for the first time, the 12 steps appeared for the first time. And they're in the same form they're in now. They were in different forms. It was back and forth. And then in the second edition, they added the 12 traditions. And they're back in back of the book, 565, in the appendices. Now, here is the problem. The one thing about which there must be unanimous opinion throughout the world is that Alcoholics Anonymous works. About that, there is no doubt, and really has never been any doubt. Alcoholics Anonymous works for alcoholics. That we all know about. When I came to Alcoholics in 1965, alcoholism, I'm speaking generally now, was not covered by insurance. Hospitals would not accept a patient, a general hospital would not accept a patient under the diagnosis of alcoholic. Alcoholics had to go in under some other diagnosis, gastritis, enteritis, colitis, all the itises. They had to be disguised, and then they could dry out, under being treated for colitis or something. And the insurance didn't cover it. Now, there have always been places where alcoholics could go, farms, sanitariums. There's one place in Connecticut comes to mind, beautiful, 9 holes of golf. It's been there forever. It's for rich people who drink too much. But the insurance didn't cover that because under the definition of a policy, insurance policy, under the definition of hospitals, they said a hospital is a place that has operating rooms and nurses and delivery, obstetricians and specialities, medical specialities. And none of these places had that, so they never qualified. So the only people who really had the benefit of professional care when it came to alcoholism were the rich, who could afford to go to these farms. And we also know that detoxification from alcohol poisoning is what it is a very, very serious matter, and you can die from it much more so than from the other drugs. Well, in any event, that all began to change in the early 70s, and pretty soon alcoholism was covered by insurance policies, and pretty soon a whole industry grew up of taking care of alcoholics, all covered by insurance. And the earliest insurance policies all covered 28 days. That was the Blue Cross standard, 28 days. It was 7 weeks, 4 weeks in hospital, 28 days. So the alcoholics got 28 days. And so all of these 28-day programs grew up around the country, and you know and I know it's nice to get an alcoholic, get them a rest for 28 days, get them off the cycle, get them they could detox them in maybe 10 days. And in the early days, they didn't know what to do. Well, they grew up around this industry, and I'm not knocking the industry, American capitalism, I'm all for it. They had to grow up with, coextensive with it, a group of people who were going to service the industry. And so therefore, we grew into having alcoholism counselors, which grew into a separate disease. And there had to be some regulation of these people, so the various states got into licensing these people, and so these things all grew up together. And then you have a very thriving industry run by alcoholism counselors who say they are in the field, is the expression they use. They're in the field. And it's only recently now that the cycle is going down. Most of the major insurance companies now will give you a detox, maybe 4 days, 5 days detox, and then the rest is what they call outpatient. You go find an alcoholism counselor in Miami now, they're all in storefronts, you know. Well, once the insurance attached, then they're put in something that we call money. Now, the one thing we all know in our history, in our traditions, and ever since Mr. Rockefeller was so smart, he said money is no good for people like this. No money. Don't give any money. But alcoholics should not have money. And we're doomed to communal poverty. Except for us lawyers, who are an exception to the rule. And deservedly so, Ralph, don't you think? And so, as long as the insurance covered it, pretty soon a lot of people began showing up at alcoholism rehabilitation centers who were not alcoholics. But they were not alcoholics, but they were in this alcoholism rehabilitation center because they were covered by insurance. And the alcohol rehabilitation center, normally speaking, only has the one van. So they can't be driving them all over town to various meetings. And they know AA works, so they would take them to the AA meeting. And we're so dopey that we let them in. Because we're full of love and tolerance. That's our code. And every once in a while there'll be some hard ass like me who would say to one of these gentlemen, what do you want here? And I said, well, I'm an addict. I know, but you're an addict. What do you want here? This is not for addicts. Go away. But people like me were fairly rare. And they would tell them at the hospital, tell them when you get there, make sure you tell me you're an alcoholic. Because, especially if you go to his group, because if you don't tell him an alcoholic, he'll throw you out. So make sure you tell him you're an alcoholic. So they'd all show up and then they talk fast. They'd say, alcoholic addict, like a hyphen. I'm an alcoholic addict. Or I'm an addict alcoholic. And then we got all the andas came by. They really should say I'm an alcoholic anda. Right? Anda. And if you cause a fuss, they'd say the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Correct? And they take that third tradition and stick it up your noodle. Now I'm going to read to you the third tradition in the long form, and we'll start that way. You ready? Our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover. Nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that, as a group, they have no other affiliation. Now, I submit to you that the third tradition limits Alcoholics Anonymous to alcoholics. The name of the book would give you a clue. The fifth tradition, no, that's not right. Where's the other tradition? Yes, the fifth tradition. I thought I was right. Each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity and love and tolerance. I'm talking about love and tolerance. Having but one primary purpose. And that phrase, but one primary purpose, is italicized. It's underlined here. See? That of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. I do not have a message for a non-alcoholic because I don't have any non-alcoholic experience. How would I bring a message to a non-alcoholic when I don't know anything about non-alcohol? My experience is of an alcoholic, and that's what we share here. And I'm not putting anybody down, and I'm not, remonstrating with anybody, and I'm not saying I'm better or worse than anybody else. I am telling you what is an absolute truth. Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics. What in the name of God is so complicated about that? Is that complicated? Narcotics Anonymous is for narcotics. Overeating Anonymous is for overeating. Time magazine, if you credit Time magazine with anything, some years ago, I wrote a story, as you know, they usually do. Newsweek just had one about alcohol. It pops up every few years or so. And Time magazine said there were 500 organizations that ended in Anonymous. Can you conceive of that? 500. Including former owners of Edsels, whose lives turned to shit when they bought Edsels. People who hate their brothers-in-law. It was amazing, the stuff they had there. And they all traced it back, of course, to Alcoholics Anonymous. There's an 800 number. There's an 800 number. You call in Manhattan, New York City. You call the 800 number. You tell them your problem, they tell you where to go. You say, I'm sticking bananas up my ass, and I cannot stop. And they say, Church of the Heavenly Rest, 2 o'clock. Bring your own banana. For everything they got a thing. For everything you got a thing. You know, it's absolutely unlimited. It's absolutely unlimited. Now, our 12th step of our program is like all of the stuff in our program, very, very simple. It says we try, you and I, carry this message, and the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is not stop drinking. That's not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The message of Alcoholics Anonymous is you will be able to relate yourself once again to God. When Alcoholics Anonymous was 25 years old, the Grapevine recently reprinted the correspondence between Bill Wilson and the great Carl Jung. And Bill Wilson wrote Carl Jung in 1960 on our 25th anniversary. He said, Dr. Jung, we of Alcoholics Anonymous consider you to be a founder because of your advice to Roland Hazard. That led to Ebby Thatcher. That led to Bill Wilson. That led to Bob Smith, and so forth. He got back a very nice letter from Dr. Jung. And Dr. Jung said, I remember Roland Hazard. Said his problem was that he had separated himself from the whole, W-H-O-L-E, in medieval language, from a union with God. Huh? Dr. Jung knew that Roland Hazard's problem was not that he drank like a pig. That's just how the problem manifested itself. Dr. Jung knew that Roland Hazard's spirit was the thing that was affected. And Dr. Jung even made a joke in Latin, and to show you I'm erudite. He said, spiritus contra spiritum. You see, in Latin, the same word for spirit is the word for alcohol. Spirits, you know, wine and spirits. Spiritus, he says, spirits against spirit. And that's what alcoholism is. it comes and it takes our spirit away. It comes, that creature that comes in the middle of the night with the terror and reaches in. Jack London, an alcoholic suicide at age 40, wrote to his friend Jack Barrymore, and he said, Jack, last night the creature came and he took my heart away. This is a disease of the spirit and of the soul. And if we don't take care of ourselves and our spirits and our souls here, we will be in big trouble. And that's the whole point of this primary purpose. And that's the whole point of the announcements they make about singleness of purpose. It isn't that we're trying to exclude anybody. Our book says we are never to be exclusive. We are to be all-inclusive. But it's all-inclusive with respect to alcoholics. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But I think you should know these things if you have to deal with these people who insist on trying to use our own traditions against us. When someone tells you that all I need is a desire to stop drinking, no. You need to be an alcoholic. And that is someone who is powerless over alcohol. And you can have all the desires you want, and you won't be able to stop drinking. Because the one thing about alcoholics is they can't stop drinking. Correct? You could do anything else. You could probably fly to the moon. But you had absolutely nothing to face that booze with. And somebody said to me recently, what was your favorite kind of booze? I said, more. I said, why? I said, more. So what will you have to drink? More? Just, give it to me. Okay. Anyhow, the message is this message. The message of Jung to Roland Hazard. Find a spiritual experience. The message of Sokor to Bill Wilson. Don't tell them. Tell them they're going to die. Try to get them, pay their attention. Their soul, their spirit is in jeopardy. This is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're not a religion. And thank God we're not saints. We are not saints. Thank God for that. I'd be out of here very soon. What would we do with a saint if he showed up here? Where's he going to put him? Don't put him next to me. Jesus. Hello. What's your name? I'm Frank. I'm from Mississippi. Get out of here. Make me feel bad just looking at you. Jesus. When somebody walks in and says, I'm Charlie and I'm an alcoholic, I know a great deal about him. Right then and there. He's a rotten, dirty, no good, lying, cheating son of a bitch who stole money from his parents, his brothers, his sisters, his neighbors. He's no goddamn good. My kind of a guy. And that's what the step says. Now, in 1950, just to show you this is not a new problem we're dealing with. This is not a new problem. There's not very little things are new. Here we go. 1958. I've been an alcoholic since I've been through. I was here when Jesus came by in the 60s. He came by. People were coming to meetings bringing Bibles. They wanted to rap about Jesus. I was here when the hypoglycemic epidemic struck. Everybody was hypoglycemic. They're all walking around having sugar, glucose tolerance tests, they're eating little meals. The ladies liked it. They all lost weight, they're running around eating trail mix or something, God. And then the victims all showed up, the 80s, and the victims all came in. They're all from dysfunctional families, Does anybody know what a functional family is? They're all from dysfunction. They were probably the cause of the dysfunction in their family. I just found out about 4 years ago that I'm from a dysfunctional family. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. I had no father and an alcoholic mother. Very dysfunctional. Well, we had breakfast at 7 and dinner at 6. Worked all right for me. So anyhow, and I'm digressing. In 1958, Bill Wilson in 1958 wrote an article for the Grapevine because the non-alcoholics were beginning to show up in great numbers. I was here when the pills began to come through. You know, you have to understand that prior to the 1960s, there was no such thing as psychotropic medicine. Before the 1960s, there was no Valium. There was no Librium. There was no anything. There was phenobarbital, you know, sedation, stuff like that. But all of those other pharmaceuticals, the psychotropic pharmaceuticals, were not there. They just didn't exist. And all of a sudden they came. And I remember Milltown was the first one. And I got a bottle of that. I'm drunk all the time in the 60s, and I'm really reaching my peak. I'm around the 63. I'm really at the top of my form. That was the first time I came to AA, and my wife, she, who must be obeyed, made me go to this doctor, and he gave me a bottle of Milltown. And he said, when you feel like drinking, have one of these. Well, I felt like drinking day and night, so I was having a lot of Milltown. And I felt pretty good. And I felt so good that I walked into a saloon, and I said to this jerk that I used to know, drink with, look at that, I got that stuff, Milltown. He said, yeah, throw it right in the middle of a martini. He said, we call it a Miltini. It will knock you on your ass. I said, it will? He said, yeah, boom, boom. And it did. And that was the end of my involvement with psychotropic drugs. So anyhow, here's Bill now, and here's the 60s, and the value is so up, and they taught like this. The mouth gets very dry, and they said, what the hell is the matter with you? Nothing's the matter with me. Well, you can't smell anything, but he's acting like a fool. He's falling asleep in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, that kind of stuff. And he said, well, you taking something just what the doctor prescribed. He said, say, where is he? He's got it in every pocket. He's got his hat, oh, Jesus. And the question is, what do you do with these people? There's no difference. There's no difference in principle between Valium eaters, cocaine users, heroin users, gay, overeating cross-dressers. What's the difference? Tell me the difference. Here's Bill. Now, we wouldn't characterize Bill as a AA hard ass, would we? Says sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps, is the sole purpose of an AA group. Groups have repeatedly tried other activities and they have always failed. It has also been learned that there is no possible way to make non-alcoholics into AA members. See? Now, in case you had trouble with that, absorbing that, we printed that. We printed this, which is this light. And in this, we repeat, and we put it in color. I see no way of making non-alcoholics into AA members. Experience says we can admit no exceptions, even though drug users and alcoholics happen to be cousins of a sort. If we persist in trying this, it'll be hard on the drug user himself. He's in the wrong place. You understand? He's in the wrong place. As well as on AA, we must accept the fact that no non-alcoholic, whatever his affliction, can be converted into an alcoholic and an AA member. You understand? Now, that's not being hard-ass. That's the core of this fellowship. Non-alcoholics do not belong in AA. That's that. Now, they have these questions. Can a non-alcoholic pill or drug addict become an AA member? No. Can such a person be brought as a visitor to an open AA meeting for help and inspiration? Of course, of course, of course. If so, should these non-alcoholic pill or drug users be led to believe they have become AA members? No. Can a pill or drug taker who has a genuine alcoholic history become a member of AA? That's the Anders. That's the Anders. They're alcoholics. They have an ego problem, like a lot of alcoholics do. Here's the way this one goes. You're an alcoholic? Yeah. Well, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I raise you one. What do you think of that, you poor rummy? You know, and then, or they may have a couple. Gay, I'm a gay, overeating, cross-dressing alcoholic drug addict. My God, you know, boggles the mind. This is an ego problem. They want, first of all, in violation of everything we hold dear, they want to be different. You understand? The whole core of you and I being together is that we are the same. Correct? Yeah. We are we. Correct? We are we. Without we being we don't have the first step, we don't have anything. We are we. They are not we. They want to be recognized as somebody different, who have suffered in some peculiar way that poor rummy me could never possibly understand. You're an alcoholic, you poor thing. Well, listen to this. I'm also, and then they list out who gives a shit? And besides, they're saying the same thing twice, are they not? See, the treatment centers are really the villains in this piece. And is that right to keep talking? And I don't like to beat on the treatment centers because they're practically out of business. Practically. I mean, some of them have got such deep pockets that they'll last for another 10 years, but the rinky-dink ones are gone, and the big ones are still hanging around, you know. But in the treatment centers, they promote the big lie in this area, the big lie. And it's a matter of principle. Here's the big lie. The big lie is this. One addiction is the same as another. That is a big lie. That is not the same medically. It is not the same chemically. And it certainly is not the same in recovery. You go out to that street over there and go to the supermarket and bring me back 100 people. Any 100. Put them in this room. Give me an unlimited supply of cocaine. Put it right over there. Come back in a month. I will give you 100 cocaine addicts. Every one of them will do anything I ask them to do to get their hands on this stuff. You understand? Go get me another 100. Bring them over here. Give me an unlimited supply of whiskey. Pile it up over there. Come back in a month. I might have 12 alcoholics for you. 8, 12, something like that. Because alcohol does not cause alcoholism. Cocaine causes cocaine addiction. You understand? It's a physical addiction. Alcoholism starts with a physical addiction, but it's nothing like a physical addiction. If alcoholism was just a physical addiction, we'd have one step. You and I, correct? Come to the meeting. What should I do? Stop drinking, moron. Oh, is that it? Yeah, see up there? Step 1, the big step. Don't drink. You here again? This is your second week here. You see that big first step? Don't drink some more. Eh? Don't drink. That would be the thing. But it's not. Alcoholism is not caused by alcohol. Alcoholism is caused by a separation from God. When this happened to me, I don't know. I know it happened, but I can't tell you when, I suppose. I'm not even quite sure I was ever connected. I'm not religious. I was not religious then. I'm not religious now. I've never been religious. I have and my name is O'Keefe. I have a Catholic education. I'm a graduate of a Jesuit university. I've never been religious. It just never got my attention. It didn't bother me. I'm very, very smart. It just didn't interest me. I thought, that's nice, you know. I was interested in basic things, trying to get laid. And, get a job, stuff like that, find some money so I could get laid. And then I got to be a roue alcoholic, and I became sort of a man of the world, you know. I went in 5,000 bars. I got laid twice. You know? But I digress. You see, let me tell you about Dr. Jelinek. Dr. Jelinek, back in the 30s and 40s, Dr. Jelinek ran the Yale University School of Alcoholism Studies. See, we've been looking at this thing for a long time. It's now at Rutgers University. They moved it. But Jelinek ran this thing. It was connected with Yale. It was part of Yale, quite a place. And he developed, you've seen the Jelinek curve about tolerance going up like that, and then zoom, it falls off like you fall off a cliff. That's the Jelinek curve. And in some circles, alcoholism was called Jelinek's disease. So the great Jelinek, scientist that he was, said to a couple of his assistants one day, these people are so baffling. They do such wild things. You know, our book says not only are we insane, but we are strangely insane. And this guy Jelinek was confirming all of that. You know, our book says the problem centers in the mind. Wouldn't you think a book says the problem centers in the alcohol? The problem centers in the fact these people drink impossible amounts of alcohol. The problem centers in the mind. And Jelinek says the only way I can figure this one out is I'm going to become an alcoholic. This is a real scientist. He says, I will become an alcoholic. And then I'll understand. So he said, bring out some booze. So they went and they got him some booze. He got through about a half a bottle of bourbon. And he was sitting in a chair, and he fell out of the chair. And he hit his head on the corner of the desk as he went out. And he hit the floor and crapped in his pants. And passed out. And 3 hours later he came to. You know the first thing he said was, I will never, ever drink anything like that again as long as I live. Now that's not us. You're there at 7 in the morning banging on the door of that bar. Open up this dump. You got anything left? You know that stuff that took away my driving license, my license to be a lawyer, my marriage license, my house, my money, my family, my children, my self-respect, my esteem, my spirit? You got anything left? Give it to me. What's the price? Here. What do you want? Here's my house, here's my car, here's my children. Give me that shit. Is that the same shit that knocked you out of the chair, hit you in the head? I love that crap. Give me more. Did you ever say, I'll never drink that again as long as I live? That stuff is crap. That makes you crazy. Sure it does. That's why we drink it. That's what Silkworth said. He said, alcoholics don't drink because it tastes good. If it tastes good, go have an ice cream soda, for Christ's sake, and leave me alone. Said men and women drink essentially for the effect it has on them. I have a brother-in-law, Louis. Louis is a lawyer. He's a graduate of the Harvard Law School. You say to Louis, would you like another drink, Louis? You know what he says? No, thank you. I'm beginning to feel it. You want to get him right by the neck and say, that's what it's for, Louis. That's why we drink it, because we feel it, you dumb bastard. And he's just beginning to feel it. No. Harvard Law School, they don't want to lose control of the world, you know. Now, all of this has to do with what we're doing here. What is our message, and for whom is our message? And it isn't that, again, I'm not trying to exclude anybody. If someone tells me they have a serious heroin problem, I have great empathy for that. I really do. I do a great deal of work with lawyers throughout the country. And as a matter of fact, I am the #1 drunken lawyer in the United States of America. I am chairman of the board of the lawyers in AA, International Lawyers in AA. And we have lots, especially where I live in Miami, lawyers with cocaine problems. And I have great empathy for that. And I try, to find somebody they can talk to. Ralph and I were talking about it at lunch. I get them somebody who's had a cocaine problem. I'm not going to talk to them about their cocaine problem. I never had any cocaine problem. Not that I wouldn't have. Nobody gave me any. That's all. It wasn't available. I could become addicted to raisins, for Christ's sake or something. And so I'm not putting